Check 1 2. Do 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 do. Hi everybody, welcome back. A lot of do-dos to start the show. I'm a big do-doer. A little sing, a little dance, a little soft shoe. Nice to see you. My name is Dean, as always. We are brought to you by our friends at Cantork. Go to cantork.com for more information on how you can get yourself a hardworking, rugged torque wrench that nobody else seems to know how to make other than my good friends at Cantork. Also, a quick hello and a hi to our friends at Muse Massage Spa, sexologists with a podcast called Muse on the Mic. Check that out on their Patreon feed, YouTube as well. And, of course, our friends at factcheck.io, factcheck.io, the world's disinformation killer. Check their software, join their beta test team today. Go to factcheck.io. Well. My next guest, Wednesday's guest. Yes, you are Wednesday. She is Wednesday's child. I like that. Wednesday's child. She is Wednesday's child. She is not to be messed with. She comes from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, home of the mob. It's true. Home of more scam callers and HVAC phone calls to fix your ducts than any place in Canada. And she's just an arduous supporter of Canada's Homeless Foundation, Canada's homeless folks. She has been just a warrior when it comes to political shit. And when things get weird, there's no one I love talking about weird shit with more than the host of the O Show, Miss Laura Babcock, who joins us today. Laura, how are you?
I'm good. What an intro. And I, too, enjoy talking to you about weird shit, Dean. We come from a weird place, you and I. So
Yeah, we're weirdos. We come from weird families, weird churches, weird backgrounds. And when you can find somebody like you, like I interviewed Brianna Brown a couple weeks ago. She came from a religious cult as well.
Yeah.
She'd be awesome on your show. You'd love to have her. But I interviewed Brianna Brown the other day, and it was fascinating because I thought to myself, what kinship we have with people who've been fucked over.
Yeah.
Huh?
Right.
Kinship. It's like you found your people. When I get a chance to talk to you, you're in media, I'm in media. You like to talk about things, I like to talk about things. You came from a religious upbringing, I came from a religious upbringing. We don't like unfair together in a nuclear capacity. It's been nice to watch you go after it over the past couple of years. Good to see you.
I hate nothing more than injustice and bullies, right? When you grow up in a cult and you are forced to deprogram yourself, you know, it takes a long time. It's a heavy process. And so when you see other people getting gaslit or programmed or people being stomped down, pisses me off. You know, so I don't wake up in the morning with an agenda more than I get pissed off by my first coffee by something that's going on. And then I book a guest and do an O show. Right?
Yeah, I know how it works where you wake up and you're still full of yesterday's content. Like yesterday, case in point, Pierre Poilievre gets kicked out of the House of Commons. Then, within minutes, he's got a fundraising email out going, you're going to have to give me money, people. Look at how downtrodden I am. No one's allowing me to say my shit. And I'm like, wow. Who do I want to fucking chop that guy into pieces with tomorrow? None other than Laura Babcock. And so we're on to talk about this morning. You do a lot of local stuff in Hamilton. You've been a huge supporter, uploading and trying to explain to people how bad the homeless situation is. You put your money where your mouth is. You run a PR company. You're a PR professional. You're a broadcast professional. I am neither of those things. I am not as empathetic as you, nor do I have the skills that you have, nor do I have any respect for political institutions. So let's just set the table there is that you are obviously professional. You have the ability to couch your words. I don't. So what happened yesterday in the House of Commons with Pierre Poilievre getting kicked out for calling the prime minister a wacko didn't bother me in as much as the fundraising email that came out at the exact same time, knowing that it was just another operation, another work. But what do you make of yesterday? What do you make of what he's doing to decorum, if there is any left in politics?
Listen, I'm not an institutionalist per se, although I haven't found a better alternative. So, the old Churchill quote, democracy's messy, but, what else are we going to do? So I don't mind the House being kind of raucous. It's supposed to be the House of Commons, of the common person, right? As opposed to the sober second thought chamber of the Senate. So I don't mind that. The word wacko, not particularly a big deal. It'll, of course, stick to Trudeau now. I can't wait to see all the wacko flags in my neighborhood because I have a lot of the F. Trudeau flags driving around in trucks in Hamilton.
You got Hamilton's a hotbed of F. Trudeau flags on hockey sticks.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you know what, that'll stick, and it's then it's the next evolution of Axe the Tax. It's going to work. But what I actually don't love is just how brazen it is. If you're going to make some comments in the House, there was years ago when Sheila Copps was called something, Tequila Sheila, I think. And there have been times where the F-bomb's been dropped. And I mean, that's the House of Commons. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
It's stuff of legend. But it's that idea of the fundraising off of it, the victim narrative, the, oh, woe is he. He doubled down like 4 times or 3 times. I watched the clip, right? It felt all very staged. I felt like I was watching the Marjorie Taylor Greene playbook or the Matt Gaetz playbook out of Congress. I watched US politics almost as much or maybe even more than Canadian. And that's what they've been doing for years, the MAGA people, is that they say outrageous things. They do outrageous antics when they're on camera in the seat of government. And then they go on and do all of their, echo chamber media on it, sell T-shirts off of it, do fundraising letters about how they're being persecuted by the man. I mean, it just felt like, if you're going to just rip off MAGA directly, then just become, what do you call them, Maple MAGA? Maple MAGA. Own it. Yeah, just own it, because it's exactly the same nonsense we've been watching out of the U.S. And I think, so that's what bothers me, not the histrionics in the chamber. It's the histrionics for profit or the histrionics for this victim narrative that drives me nuts.
Yeah, and there is the fundraising portion of those histrionics, and I'll get to some of the receipts. And so yesterday was about 2:30. Pierre Poilievre, who's just a douchebag, like just a populist, angry, authoritarian douchebag who a couple of days ago was like, I'm going to change the law to give police the power to hold anybody in jail for as long as they fucking want because I'm the law and order guy. Like, he's the dollar store Trump dude. And so I have no respect for him as an individual. For me, this has nothing to do with politics, everything to do with him as a human being. And he doesn't just have character flaws. He is one of, and I've talked to lots of people who know him, the angriest, most non-one-dimensional, biggest piece of shit on the hill. Nobody likes him. Nobody in his party likes him. His friends don't like him. He doesn't have any friends, and the friends that he has are friends of convenience like John Baird and other people that have plenty to hide. And so he hides behind them. He's never had a job, a real job. He started doing that gig when he was 21 or 22, given hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. He's never had to apply for a job. He's never had a job in the real world. He's been on the taxpayer dime this whole time. And now what he's saying is not only is he going to change the law and use the notwithstanding clause to give police extraordinary measures to hold people like Umar Zamir, who was found guilty of killing a police officer, not guilty of killing a police officer, and whose entire life has been taken away from him. If it was up to him, he'd be able to put people in jail for the rest of his life. This is the authoritarian part that I think a lot of us have been trying to warn everybody else about. But it's fucking amazing to me, Laura, that people aren't paying attention to this part of it.
I don't think that that's true. I think that people like it, and I'll tell you why. I've been watching it closely, as I mentioned, in the U.S. Our pal Charles Adler and I had a conversation in 2015 about Trump becoming the president and that authoritarian cultish stuff that I was seeing way back then on the trail and in his ramble up. And so just to separate those two things that you brought up, Dean, on the policy speech, talking about using the notwithstanding clause to, increase incarceration and sort of circumvent jurisprudence. I know that Poilievre claims that everything he's suggesting is constitutional, but there is the law and there's the spirit of the law. And so even if there's some technical way that he would be able to make some sort of a legislative change to enable that kind of authority of police to further incarcerate people, that is authoritarian, right? That is too much power concentrated. That is not something that we want to have in this country. We are still a democracy, a flawed one with a flawed government, but we still are a democracy. And so when you hear that come out of someone's mouth, any leader, you know, if Jagmeet said it, I'd be just as alarmed. If Trudeau said it, I'd be just as alarmed. I fought hard when Ford tried to use it in Ontario against the educational workers. I mean, that is not something as Canadians that we want to see used for purposes like that. That wasn't the point of it. So that's concerning. Now, in terms of Poilievre's character, I've never met the man, but he does get off serious Ted Cruz vibes. You know, that I wouldn't hang out with the dude. I would have like walked the other way at university if I saw him coming down the hallway kind of vibes.
So that's the guy that comes around, like you're a female, right? It's a guy that you see in the bar that comes around, and as soon as he comes around, you put your hand over your drink, right? That Ted Cruz sort of mentality where you're
there's a peevish anger that I get off of Poilievre. And it's that peevishness, that anger below the surface that often manifests in condescension, you know. And when he speaks to women in the press corps the way that he does, I mean, that's deeply off-putting for me personally. And so, but to the bigger point about you saying people not paying attention, I think they are, and I think they like what they hear. I mean, we've seen that over and over in the United States. There is an audience for authoritarianism. After a pandemic and the financial crisis post-pandemic and the adjustment to the economy, which is massive. This happened 100 years ago. The rise of authoritarianism and the rise of a war. I mean, this is where we're kind of following a historic playbook here. You add in the mix the crisis mitigation around climate change and the disruption to the global markets with AI that's coming. 30% of us are going to be replaced in our professions, right? There's a lot of angst and anger. And, you know, I hosted the Hamilton Anti-Hate Conference a couple of years ago, Dean. And one of the things, I was just an MC, but one of the things that I learned, I think it was from the Southern Law group from the US that was part of the conference, was that where anger is, hate organizes, right? So people have a lot of reasons to be very, very angry. Inflation's not easy. It's not easy to wonder if your kids are ever going to be able to access the housing market. There's a tremendous amount of stress out there. There's a tremendous amount of fatigue around Trudeau as an individual and the Trudeau government. The sort of way they helped with the pandemic, that honeymoon is over. Voters now are looking at all of these other problems and saying, what have they been up to the last 9 years? And so I think people are craving someone who is the antithesis of Trudeau, someone who is not going to put their first foot forward with a compassionate lens, right? With a feminist lens, with a lens towards, you know, Canada as it was. They want, I mean, remember Trump's speech in 2016 where he talks about American carnage? I've said publicly several times, I feel as though I'm watching Poilievre run the 2016 Trump playbook.
Yeah.
And some of the language, the rhetoric, I mean, it just feels like that. And it is a playbook. It works. People say my anger, I can't express it well. There's lots of problems in our society right now. We've seen an uptick in a lot of behaviors associated with anger and frustration and all kinds of things. And people are saying, let me channel it. And Trump, the way that he got elected, Dean, was he had people listen to American radio, pick up the anger narratives and channel that stuff, right? So when I hear Poilievre say something like, I'd lock him up, or, you know, we'd keep him in jail or whatever, it's like, no, it's not rational. It's not fair. It's counterintuitive to the fact that Umar Zmir was vindicated because the actual footage didn't match the stories, right? And that the judge accused the cops of possible collusion. So, but this person now is being used as a tactic to kind of focus anger and justify these authoritarian tendencies or policies. So, in the big picture of it, yes, we've got a peevish guy who's personally very unappealing, but there's a whole lot of anger that has seeds of anger that have been sown. And, and maybe that whirlwind is being reaped to bring us all the way back to our Bible upbringings.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? And you see a lot of people, it would be really lovely to go back to with some kind of theocratic understanding of colonialism and why we all have to submit to it, or a police state. It'd be a lot of fun, which is what he's talking about, right? And that's the Anglo-Saxon language of Jordan Peterson. It's the authoritarian language that he uses when he comes to the notwithstanding clause. To your point, I think that there are certain people who don't pay attention to that, who have always, and I think you're 100% right, who will always vote conservative, who tune that shit out anyway because they're just lazy and boring, and it's how their parents always voted, and they live in Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba. Like that's just who they are, or they live in rural centers. And then, of course, there's the aspect of this that I think a lot of people are paying attention to your point, is that there is a certain segment of Canada who literally pines for some kind of authoritarian leadership. There's a certain segment in Canada that is religious in nature, that is lobby in nature, that pines for different self-interest reasons, right? It pines for like strong leadership, which is what they call it. This is not strong leadership. This is someone who's willing to change democracy, change the rules of engagement, change the charter of rights and freedoms in this country so that he can do what he wants because he is an authoritarian. He is an egalitarian. He is a piece of shit. And so what he's done is he's ported that onto certain groups of people. And we all know who those people are, right? They're the small, militarized, radicalized versions of whatever he's trying to accomplish, because they know that those are the people that'll give him money. He can lie to them and they'll go, oh yeah, okay, Justin Trudeau's handing out fentanyl on the streets of Vancouver. Let's vote against him. Let's fill up the coffers. And to that point, it is a strategy. To your point, it is very MAGA or Maple MAGA. He got kicked out of the House of Commons yesterday for calling Trudeau a wacko. I didn't have a problem with that. There's Greg Fergus going, I'm kicking you out. I love that stuff. So fucking boring. And as soon as he gets kicked out, I'll tweet out tomorrow. This is at what? 2:49 p.m. He got kicked out at 2:30. I'll tweet out tomorrow as I'm being silenced by the radical left fundraising email tomorrow. That's the whole point here. I didn't even have to wait 10 minutes. This came out 10 minutes later. Dean, this just happened. And by the way, I keep getting subscribed to Poilievre's email. Like I keep unsubscribing and someone keeps adding me to it. So I don't even know why I'm getting these, but I love it. Dean, this just happened. The Liberal speaker just, by the way, Greg Fergus is not a Liberal speaker, just threw Pierre Poilievre out of the House of Commons for calling Justin Trudeau's policy wacko. It was Pierre wrong. And then he goes on to list a series of lies. Legalizing open use of hard drugs like crack meth illegal is wacko. And that's a huge lie, and that hasn't happened. And then 6 people died from overdoses every day is wacko. Yeah, but that's not from those drugs, you dummy. And then kids playing next to used syringes is wacko. I have yet to see those pictures or videos. And then here's the point. This is the point, Laura Babcock from the O Show, my friend Laura. Dean, these are wacko policies from a wacko prime minister. We must defeat this wacko woke extremist Trudeau government. And we need you on our side to win. Chip in now. Donate today. Send me your money. These people had a fucking fundraiser that went off the hook last year. $35.2 million they have boned people for. Boned people with emails like that. That, Laura, is the whole point, is it not?
Well, that's the MAGA playbook. I mean, it's those small donors, right? Repeat small donors based on this victim narrative and these push campaigns. I mean, it is literally the playbook. And who's coming to Canada on a panel with a bunch of other people from the right wing?
Donald Trump Jr.
So I mean, none of this is a surprise for those of us who have been following the rise of authoritarianism and the Trump MAGA movement in the U.S. This is the playbook. Right? Those fundraising emails, those micro donations, this idea of this victim narrative, that he had to get kicked out, right? Had to keep ratcheting it up, had to keep doubling, tripling down. I mean, who's the king of tripling down? Trump. Yep. And Trump disrupted the ecosystem with that kind of stuff. He broke with all the sort of parliamentary pleasantries or congressional pleasantries that used to be the de rigueur in the US and Canada. And he broke the system. And then that is how you do it. You break the existing system and you replace it with a new one. And the new one that is traipsing around the globe, we know, is authoritarianism. Now, what's fascinating about this, and sorry to geek out on you here,
please.
But I've heard some excellent commentary lately, right? Because when people say, "Oh, but there's no one, walking with jackboots in the streets and formations, and they're not Nazis, and there's none of this kind of stuff," and I was listening to a commentator in the U.S. Who said. Actually, a novelist, who's an author, who said, the rise of authoritarianism and endorsing violence within political systems. And I'm not saying Poilievre has done that, but certainly this policing notwithstanding thing is alarming. But it looks different in every country in every iteration, right? And so in the US, Christofascism, or Christian nationalism, they're calling it, is not Christian. It's not a religion. It is a political belief system that believes in nationalism, right? Which is this idea that, we are not equal, we are dominant. We are dominant as a nation. We are dominant as Christians within that nation. And so that is what the rise of fascism looks like in the US, because the US has the separation of church and state, but it's a very deeply religious country. And so they are using part of the evangelicals to create Christian nationalism, which is their version of fascism. And so we don't conflate it with Christianity, but it does have some of the evangelical wing, hence, the Trump Bible and all this nonsense that we see down there. But in Canada, so here's where I'm bringing this to. What does it look like in Canada? Right? We are not as religious as the US is. And so in a country like ours, it's not going to look like, God forbid it did back in Germany, but where are we going to see those alarms? What is it going to look like? What is our culture's iteration of this movement going to be? And I think we're seeing some of it in terms of rhetoric, and we're seeing, and part of what Poilievre was, of course, upset about was the demand that he denounce the support of Alex Jones in the U.S. and that he denounced any affiliation with white supremacy in this country. And, and so then he went back in with the wacko line and all the rest of it. But why the need for that denunciation? You've got, of course, some people saying lots. I had thousands of comments yesterday saying, what, it's not true. It's a lie. It's liberal desperation. It's blah, 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 blah. But there's a lot of that conversation in this country coming from a lot of different places, right? And so, the question we have to ask as Canadians is, who is rising in power in this country? Why are they? Who are they affiliated with? Whose policies are going to be enacted should there be, and so I was upset when the speaker or whatever invited the Nazi to Parliament. I was furious about that. I was furious that the speaker didn't lose their job over it. And it was an embarrassing moment, not just for Canada, but for Zelensky, who's got enough problems fighting, global fascist in chief Putin. So, I'm equally critical when I see anyone adjacent to any of this horrendous stuff. But it's, in my mind, there's a difference between inviting somebody to a thing and then saying we shouldn't have done that, and this rhetoric that we're seeing build across the country. And for the first time in my life, Dean, I had a white supremacist come at me about the skin color of my children and that I must loathe my own skin color. And I'm like, oh God, I've never had that directly come at me before, but I was getting that yesterday online.
You're not a mixed race family, are you?
Well, I'm an Anglo-Saxon mutt, as I call it. I'm English-Irish.
Yeah, you're white. Yeah.
But old stock, as Harper would say. My family's been here since whatever, they were United Empire loyalists back in the day. But I married into a family that are Southern European, I've never had, and this is maybe just I live in a bubble, but I've never had someone directly try to have a conversation with me about my lack of white pride before. And I was like, oh, really? I make a critique about Poilievre, and I'm now being asked to, declare my white pride. And I'm like, if you don't think this shit's in this country, you're wrong. It is here. And why is it here? Again, the 100-year cycle. A lot of disruption, a lot of economic insecurity, a lot of anger, right? A lot of reasons to be pissed off.
Yeah. No, listen, that is fascinating. I mean, the racist tint to the whole Poilievre thing and the supporters of his, and it comes from Diagolon. There's a gentleman named Derek Rance. There's another guy named J.M. McKenzie. These are guys that have sent me and my children death threats saying, I know where your children are. I've seen tweets and texts from them, private tweets and texts from them, mocking Jews as non-whites. I mean, I've seen it all. And so when they sit there and they say, oh, well, we're not a racist group of people, I will directly challenge that and say, no, I have proof that you are. And they're attracted to Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre spent some time in a trailer adorned with one of their flags on the weekend. And this is what everybody seems to have a problem with, is, him at the F Trudeau rally. And if you ask me, getting kicked out of the House of Commons yesterday, turning that into a fundraiser, is a really great distraction from what we saw, which is him courting, allegedly, according to people who were there, with the smell of alcohol on his breath. He is indeed bothered by something. I can't tell you whether or not firsthand he was drunk, but I mean, these are reports and rumors that are wild now, so there's got to be something here. A prime minister in waiting doesn't just show up to a homeless encampment and hang out with a bunch of people with fuck Trudeau flags. It just doesn't happen in a world where common sense is supposed to be the most important thing.
We got a diesel heater in there. We got the donations from everybody that's been stopped by in there.
You can see the Diagolon flag there. I don't even know what he was doing in the trailer, Laura.
Exactly.
Like, I want to know what he was, because he comes out of the trailer and he looks incredibly disheveled. Like someone that just, like one of those Sunday morning walks I used to do when I was 19 or 20, where you're like, I just woke up at some guy's house. I have no idea what happened, but I'm glad I have my pants on. That's what we're dealing with here. That's what that look is. But I've yet to understand why it's so difficult for him yesterday, which is what precipitated him getting kicked out, him calling the prime minister a wacko. I've yet to understand why he can't just say, yeah, I'm not a white supremacist, or yeah, I don't identify with any of those people who are white supremacists, who send tweets to people like Dean and Laura challenging their whiteness, saying that I'm shocked that you're not more proud of the skin color after you came out of some evolutionary lucky vagina. Like, I really don't understand it. I don't understand why people are proud of their skin color, specifically if they're white, because they had nothing to do with it, like literally nothing to do with it. But he literally is cornering that market, trying to tell people they should be proud of their skin color. They should be proud of where they're from, that there is anti-white sentiment, which is why he goes and he curates relationships with those people. And don't tell me he's not curating relationships with those guys. That gentleman is scared pissless of everything. He won't even stand in front of a reporter. So you think that he didn't actually feel comfortable going into that group of people, Laura?
Well, there's a lot there. I mean, in terms of why visit an encampment, I visit them all. Like, I visit them, and they're people. And
those are hungry encampments. Those are homeless encampments. These people are there by choice.
I know. I'm just saying. So I'm just saying that, going in and visiting people, even if they seem as though they'd be people that you wouldn't traditionally visit with, is one thing. If they're people who espouse beliefs that are harmful and racist. So to your point, when I've gone to an encampment, it's homeless people who are desperate for food, and I'm happy if I can to help in any way that I can. And I saw the video posted by, I think, one of the people from Diagolon saying it wasn't an encampment, and they have their own response, and people are welcome to look at it. But it's to me, it's not about a particular group or a particular symbol. It is about when a leader is seen, and this happens, right? It can be seen in a location where somebody else is there and they're not aware, or they take a photo early in a campaign and they're not totally clear on the flag behind, or whatever, right? You meet a lot of people, you go a lot of places in politics. That's why there's the concept of disavow, right? That's why there's the concept of being able to come out and say, didn't realize those folks were there. I denounce this belief or that belief, that has no part in Canada, that kind of thing, right? White supremacy has no role in Canada, hate has no role in Canada, that kind of thing. And so it was the choice not to disavow.
That's a gimme, by the way. That's an easy thing to do, even if you don't mean it.
It is, unless you are not wanting to lose any possible votes, right, from people who might espouse those beliefs. I mean, we remember the famous moment when Trump was asked during the debate to disavow the Proud Boys, right? Yeah. And he said, stand by and stand down and stand by was his answer, right? It's terrifying.
That was very, very familiar the other day, yesterday in House of Commons, when he was asked to disavow those people. And he's like, well, is he going to disavow wearing blackface when he was like 19? Because he's racist. It's like, no, that wasn't the point. That wasn't the question. And he's already apologized 400 times, said it was in bad taste when he was 20 years old.
it wasn't as bad as Trump signaling them to like, hold on, guys, I'll need you January 6th type deal. It wasn't as bad as that. But he did 4 times, you know, I feel like I'm talking about it, and the rooster crowed 3 times. He did 4 times, not take that moment to say, there is no room for hate in Canada.
Yeah.
You know, I do not associate nor court the support of anyone who espouses racism, you know, racist views.
Yeah.
And Alex Jones is a purveyor of one of the most damaging conspiracies. There was a massacre at Sandy Hook, and those families have suffered terribly because of his conspiracies. And he has been found liable for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's so hard about saying that these people that you may or may not have been visiting with, or may not have been in a phone, you know, in a photo with, or you may have gotten an endorsement from that you didn't seek out? What is so hard with setting the record straight?
Yeah.
That's my problem, Dean. It wasn't so much, did he drink in a trailer? You know what? I drink, like, I don't really care. It's not a good look.
We've all drank in trailers. If you're from Canada, you've had a couple of cocktails in a trailer. Right. Yeah,
and
yeah.
He's kind of rocking the Johnny Cash look anyway. You know, if it's a Sunday morning, that's your name. But you know, whatever. Go to the Johnny Cash Museum in Nashville. It's awesome. But the point is that it is about the opportunity as a leader to say, whatever you think I support, this is what I support, right? And instead, he took the opportunity to triple down on some silly stuff and then fundraise off of it. So that tells me a lot more than seeing him in some trailer with some people that have, you know, that have some demarcation.
Questionable dental hygiene.
Well, you know what? But even when you're, you know what? I can't get upset about dental hygiene because honestly, one thing that you find, Dean, when you're getting to spend time with people who have no access to the kind of life that we have, then one of the first things to go is their dental care, right?
Yeah,
so a lot of times when I smile at people in the work that I do, they have a hard time smiling back because they're ashamed of their teeth. So I'm never gonna trash on people for having poor dental work.
Well, that's where you and I are different. Certain people, I think, deserve it. Certain people do not. And I to your point, that brings up another issue, right? If indeed this is a strategy, is he not using people who are really compromised and unwell to make micro content? Is that not what we're watching? Is he not kettling to some extent, using people in certain situations? Like, you know, anybody that chooses to sleep in their car to axe a tax they get a rebate for, and all taxes are bad, I get that. But anybody that chooses to do that for him, which they've said they're doing that for him, and he's like, you know what, keep it up until the tax is gone. And that might be in a year. So he's telling them to hang out there for, to me, it's using really emotionally troubled people, and they know it.
Yeah, I mean, like, you remember when Trump said, "I love
poorly educated,"
poorly, or whatever he said. You know, he just comes out and says the thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, so my problem with Poilievre is that it truly is it's the artifice of it, right? You know, if he wants to be a man of the people, and some of the people who love him are people who are frustrated with society and frustrated with their economic situation and whatever, I have no problem with politicians actually meeting other people outside of their well-manicured, you know, bubble. But it is about what then comes from that, you know. Do you help them in any way? Do you enact policies that are real for them in any way? Are you fundraising off of it? Are you signaling from it? So, you know, again, I think across any political party, we see a range of cynical tactics, Dean. What I care about is the character of the leader. And that is demonstrated through what they do with the information that they have, right? What do they do with it?
Works, not words. Right.
Yeah, well, because you know what, it's you know, power.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've talked about one of the Bible verses that burned in my brain as a child during my indoctrination was, "To whom much is given, much is expected." And I always internalize that as I've been born lucky, you know, so I should do a lot with that and try to do something good with my life. But you know, power is a huge privilege, and to use it in a dangerous, haphazard, cynical way that might mislead people, and all politicians mislead people to a certain extent, but it's just that, you know, what is the outcome of all of this theater from Poilievre? What does he might be unappealing and hysterical with some of the stuff that he does, and but what policies does this guy want to bring to our country? Is it going to make life better for the people?
Have you heard of one outside the notwithstanding clause that he plans on screwing over people who might be innocent with? Like, have you heard of any policy, any fiscal, foreign, domestic policy? Not one. You haven't heard any. You just heard an airing of grievances.
I saw him try to throw up roadblocks for funding to Ukraine over some BS about their endorsement of a carbon tax. I mean, so what have we seen from Poilievre? We've seen him take a stand against that funding package to Ukraine. Mm-hmm. We've seen him talk about extra judicial authority for police through the notwithstanding clause. Those are things that are deeply alarming to me. If Trudeau said them, I'd be deeply alarmed. If Jagmeet said them, I'd be deeply alarmed. I'm deeply alarmed by anybody. I was deeply alarmed by the U.S. I was proud that even a fundamentalist Christian like the head of the Speaker of the House of in the U.S. was able to switch his mind and get that funding package through for Ukraine to fight fascism. So, I mean, this is the stuff I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. All of this stupid stuff that he's doing is theater, and it gets great fundraising and it's great clickbait. And he's a performer. All politicians are. He's just better at it in those areas. But what is he fought for? That he's fought very hard for something that is going to make our climate mitigation worse. And the carbon tax was terribly handled by the Trudeau government. They were arrogant in the rollout. They didn't understand the zeitgeist. They mislabeled the whole thing. Now they're trying to play catch up. They didn't roll that policy out well. There's no doubt about it. No. But what is the alternative that Poilievre is recommending for our climate? And that's what's concerning to me. And I have to say, just going back to that old stock Canadian thing, when Harper in desperation brought out that you remember the snitch line for non-cultural practices or whatever?
Barbaric practices snitch line. Yeah, that was a Melissa Lantzman hot idea. Yeah.
Well, when I saw that, I was at a Thanksgiving dinner with my family who, that I married into, that come from Southern Europe, right? Who have some cultural cooking and some sports they play and the color of their skin tone that could be misconstrued or not. It's not. They haven't been here forever. They came over in the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, at the time they wanted to support Trump, at least ideologically, and they wanted to support Harper because they were used to. I mean, they just that's what they grew up in. They had an authoritarian leader, and they thought that whatever. And I said to them, but you understand that you might be called. I mean, that snitch line might apply to you, And so it's like it sometimes. So that's what baffles me sometimes. It's like these white supremacist themes hurt so many Canadians if they are ever enacted. And I just want Canadians to realize that they're. Part of the reason for the rise in white supremacy is a fear that the old ways are going to change, in part because of diversity, in part because of inclusion and immigration, right? And
do you know how soft you have to be too, as a person with extreme privilege in Canada, to be afraid that some guy coming over from Iran, Iraq, some other country, you know how soft you have to be to go, fuck that guy because he's going to take my job. Fuck that guy because he's going to get a free house to live in. Fuck that guy because he's going to get help from the government. I don't get shit from the government. Do you know how much of a baby, an emotional, mental child you have to be angry and resentful over that stuff? And then do you know how much of a piece of shit you have to be to foment that anger, to use that anger? Someone who's just come here for a better life. And do we have an immigration problem in this country? I believe we do. I don't believe we put any thought into how many people we're going to fire hose into this country. But I'm not talking about those people and their skin color and where they're from in a barbaric snitch line. I'm talking about the realities and the facts around immigration. But at the same time, I have never, ever, ever felt threatened by anyone driving my Uber who came here for a better life. I have never felt threatened by anybody. And we have people that we work with in the digital game that are from other countries. And they all say the same things. we're just really happy to be here. We're really happy that we have a chance to work here, really happy that we have a chance to make some real money here. And the goal for them is to go back to their country one day, right? Because they don't get a chance to make that kind of money. So they're coming. And then those guys get angry about that too. And I'm like, man, there's things that you cannot control or change. And so what you have to do, and which is what Pierre Poilievre does such a great job of, is telling them that they are going to lose and connecting with that Anglo-Saxon anger and telling people that it's been 8 years of you losing, and you're not only going to lose your job, which is a lie because none of those people fucking drive Ubers or work at convenience stores or do the jobs that we need people to do in this country, which our entitlement prevents us from doing in many cases. But a lot of those people have been told not only are they coming for your job, which they're not, they're coming for your place in line and all your privilege. And you don't want to give up that privilege. You don't want to give up your place in line, white people. That's the only message I get from Pierre Poilievre's ranting, who he hangs out with, what he says to people about giving them back their freedom. What he's really saying is he's not saying we're going to make this the greatest country in the world. What he's saying is we're going to make this the greatest country in the world if you're a white Christian or someone that has supported us and our values and our gender hatred, our understanding of what people go through when it comes to drug and alcohol abuse. If you look at them the same way we look at them, then you need to vote for us. And it is amazing how many people have that crazy bias, Laura, because I have friends that are really progressive people who are like, I kind of like the guy because he's talking my language. He's speaking to my white self-interest. And it's fucking mind-blowing to me that nobody else sees it.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I mean, some of us obviously see it, but are we loud enough? Are we amplified enough?
Well, and you get called a racist if you point it out, right? Like you get...
Well, here's what I don't know. Like, so these conversations are ones we need to have as Canadians. We can't shy away from them, right? So I don't think that there was sufficient supports put in place for newcomers, whether they be refugees, asylum seekers, or economic immigration. We need newcomers in this country, not just because it helps with our, economy and paying our pensions and everything else, because we are not producing enough people in Canada at the moment. So that's an important part of our growth and our maintenance as a society, to bring in people. We also have a responsibility for asylum seekers. We have a responsibility for refugees. It's the right thing to do. Our country can afford it. Now, have we set up those systems to handle the amount of growth? Absolutely not. We have not. And I've been a vociferous critic of Trudeau for that. Kudos on the targets, but at the expense of what? We don't have the health supports. We don't have the job training supports. We don't have the community supports that were in place when we've had other big immigration waves. So with a lack of those things in place, the government had to do something exceptional to make it work, and they didn't. Mm-hmm. And so now we are seeing an exacerbation of all kinds of issues. And it's not the fault of any one of those people who have come to Canada. In fact, for them, it's difficult, right? It's difficult. And so what I really can't stand, Dean, is the fomenting of anger against immigrants, because it's not their fault. And all of us, unless we're Indigenous, are immigrants at one time or another, right? So the idea that we're angry at other immigrants makes zero sense. And we can be angry that there aren't sufficient planning and supports in place for them and for other Canadians who need support, 100%. We can be angry about that, but we should never make it about the individuals or their culture groups that are coming over or their countries of origin. I mean, that's just not rational. And it is deeply cynical and unfair. And we can do both. We can hold leaders to account for not properly supporting Canadians who were here before last week and all the newcomers who are coming in, or before last year or whatever. The government has let us down. Our social safety net has holes in it the size of the Titanic, right? Or a modern day cruise ship. Mm-hmm. We have failed in the last 50 years to do the Canadian promise of a robust social safety net. And so we are seeing all kinds of terrible things happening in our country. And we should hold successive governments to account for not investing in housing builds, right? for not managing the real estate market, for not putting in place all kinds of things that would have prevented this terrible housing crisis, for not addressing the drug poisoning epidemic the way that they should have, for not topping up things like ODSP. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that governments have been responsible for that they have screwed up on. None of it is at the feet of these immigrants, not a single damn thing. And so when I see any leader use immigrants as some sort of a, some sort of a scapegoat or some sort of a something to blame, that is very, very alarming for me and very, very disturbing. So I think we can have these conversations about the problem with our immigration system and not be at all racist. In fact, fixing our immigration system helps all Canadians, newcomers or people who've been here for a while. And we should demand that any government invest a whole lot more in it, because it is what we need to be doing. So when I see anyone conflate the person of the immigrant with the problems with our immigration system, I'm very alarmed by that. And I think, does that come from fear? Is it a learned behavior? Where does that come from? I don't know, but I'll tell you, every time I hear it around me, I disavow it immediately, because one of the things that I've learned over the years, Dean, is that if you're silent in a conversation like that gets anti-immigrant, not anti-immigration or pause on immigration numbers, but anti-immigrant, anti-human. If you just sit there and let it go by, you create a permission structure, right? That says that this is okay in conversation, that there's nothing wrong with what's being joked about or said here. I won't do that. If I hear that at a party with some of my friends, I'll be like, no, you know what? It's not their fault, right? Let's not blame them. We can blame Trudeau. We can blame Ford. We can blame previous federal governments. But it's got nothing to do with any of the people that we're joking about, right? Like it's okay to say that, and you have to. Otherwise, it breeds and it blossoms. And I don't want that in my country. And I think that we're not lost as a country. We're not broken as a country, but we all have a responsibility as Canadians to say, these are my values. I believe in diversity, and I believe in opportunity, and I believe in a welcoming country to the world. I also believe in proper systems and structures to support a quality of life for everyone.
Yeah, a responsible way of doing those things, right? We believe in those things, proper communication about those things, the fact that, we're not going to be putting any Canadians at disadvantage in result or regards to bringing people over here in any capacity. And it is a job, but it also is manifested, and I watch it in these Gaza protests, and I know I have no time or patience for issues in other worlds coming here, but being as immigrant happy as we are and immigration happy as we are. And listen, I'll tell you something. I am an immigrant to this country. I came over here when I was a wee lad. It was impressed upon me as a young child, dude. And my dad used to say this to me all the time: don't commit a crime because they'll deport you. And I was like 6 going, what? I get deported? What does that mean? He's like, you can't commit a crime. You're here as a privilege. And I'm like, what does that mean? Privilege. So he beat it into my head over years and years and years and years that I was really fortunate to be here. And we tend to, take that brush and we tend to paint everybody with these brushes. But as an immigrant to this country, he takes his responsibility to the Republic very seriously and the laws of this Republic very seriously. I got to tell you, there are some people from other countries that have brought their shit here that bothers me as an immigrant and a Canadian, right? As an immigrant and as a Canadian. And I see it culturally, and I understand that these are different people, and I understand that every group has its extremes. But, I mean, how do you combat that in a conversation when someone brings it up? You talk about dinner parties, someone coming up to you, you go, you got to call it out. I mean, it's not like I'm not on side with a law-abiding, law and order Canada to some extent, right? You know what I mean?
Well, but I think that's, and I've had this conversation on radio a couple times in the last couple of days. It's a nuanced conversation, but if we can't do nuanced conversations, have we not evolved? Do we not have, an executive functioning brain? I mean, have a nuanced conversation, which is to say, there should be protests against what is happening in Gaza. 35,000 people killed, civilians, children in hugely disproportional numbers. That shit has got to stop, right? That shit has got to stop. And there should be a push of all levers of power around the world to do that. Israel has a right to rout Hamas, but not in a blunt way that is killing all of these civilians. I mean, right now, the top diplomat in the world from the US is meeting with Netanyahu to make that point, right? Like, humanitarian aid should have been flowing in. You know, there's a lot of things that have been very wrong in the last 6 months, and a lot of very wrong things that happened that horrible day in October. And we can call out Hamas for holding those hostages and putting their people in such peril. And we can call them out for the horrific things that they did. And so we can support protests that are peaceful in nature when the rhetoric in the protest talks about the elimination of another people. It's wrong. It's not Canadian values. When there is threats of violence or intimidation against businesses or against another group of people, that is not Canadian values. So it's okay to have strong feelings and articulate them about injustices in the world. And it is wonderful to welcome people of all different beliefs into our country. But that doesn't mean that we give up the opportunity and the right to speak to what we believe to be true, which is, don't believe in violence, right? I don't believe in violence. I won't be part of a protest that has violence in it. And if I ever am, then I'll try to do what the Reverend Al Sharpton said on this topic when he was part of the civil rights protests back in the day, is that if you're part of a group and someone in the group starts to say something that you don't believe, you disavow it. Back to what we talked about the opportunity missed by Polyev yesterday in the House. If you're associated with something or challenged on your association about something and you find that thing to be counter to your values, you can speak to that. So I don't think Canadians should be quiet about their concerns when they hear rhetoric that is against another people or promoting violence or any kind of harassment, right? We should be able. Did I lose you there? Sorry, I just got a call from the station.
No.
Are we live here, Deep?
I got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I got you.
You know what I'm saying is that there's just, we can't shy away from this conversation, Dean, okay?
But people are scared too, right? And maybe you and I are just a special breed of individual that has the ability to keep saying certain things, whether or not you agree with them or not, and to take those bullets and to take those threats. But that's the world we live in, right? It's funny because both sides call each other snowflakes and muffins all the time.
I hadn't heard muffins.
Oh, yeah. Okay, muffin. I got that one the other day. Nothing makes me angrier than being called muffin for some reason. You can call me a million things. You can call me a jack off. You can call me an asshole. You can call me. Don't you dare call me muffin. It really bothers me for some reason. But people are afraid to speak up. People are afraid to talk about it and afraid to have those nuanced conversations. Case in point, you can have a conversation with someone from the right. I'll talk to someone from the right and they'll tell me that my perspective on immigration is seen as racist by my own people. And when I tell them, hey, listen, progressives are not my people. Common sense people are my people. And they're capable of having this conversation. And it sits in this one aspect that I've kind of drilled down on over the past little while. You have to have the capability to step outside your emotion to be able to have those nuanced conversations. And there aren't many people who can do that. There really aren't.
A couple of points on it. I mean, we're professional communicators, right? So we should have.
Well, you are. I'm a bit of a hammerhead.
I know, but you say that it's very self-effacing, but the fact of the matter is you are. And so you have the ability to be both on the meta level and in the content level stream at the same time. That's how you host shows, right?
Yeah.
So it's a skill set. But also we come from a place of great privilege. We're both white. We both are upper income, right? And so I've never, for one moment of my life, as I've learned about the various privileges that I was born with, I don't feel guilty that I have them. I just see them as, well, what can I do with them, right? Where do I use my privilege to help?
Where do I get a chance to hand over some of this beautiful privilege I was just lucked into? Yes, exactly.
So it's not a mystery that you and I do what we do because we come from a position of privilege. We are white in a country like Canada. We have advantages. We can communicate. We have education levels. I'm not sure yours, but we're probably both post-secondary. And so yes, these nuanced conversations, we have more access to have them than a whole lot of other people do for a whole lot of reasons. So we're not magical special people. We just have people who have, yes, some talent in comms and some practice at it, but also, we get to say a lot more than other people do without being immediately judged or marginalized or feeling some sort of threat. We don't come from marginalized populations. I am, of course, a woman, and that there's still some, of course, bias against women, and there's a lot of gender inequality. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I'm just saying if you've ever seen, there's kind of a wheel that talks about levels of privilege, and the more things that you tick off, the more privileged you are. Like we're sitting pretty high up there, Dean. So so we have a responsibility. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm being tough on a morning or whatever, but we have a lot of responsibility to use that inherent privilege.
Well, and listen, here's the thing. That's what drives me crazy about conservatism. That's what drives me crazy about politics. That's what drives me crazy about elites. That's what drives me crazy about lobby groups, is that, the consistent effort that they put into telling people they should protect their privilege, as opposed to a better consistent effort to tell people like us, you need to loan it out. You got to give it to people who need it, whether it's women, whether it's alcoholics, whether it's marginalized people in certain situations who don't have the ability to think for themselves, instead of abusing that privilege. And the abuse of that privilege that I see specifically in politics, specifically in what we're talking about today, and is this consistent radicalization process, right? Which is like, no, they're going to come for you. They're going to come for your privilege. You're not going to be first in line. It's going to take you forever to get your driver's license. You're never going to be. Remember the old days where you used to be able to get your passport in like 72 hours? That's gone because of all the immigrants. Remember the old days when we had social safety nets? Remember when healthcare used to work? And there's an argument to be made that healthcare never really worked the way it should have worked. But whatever. I mean, there are so many different ways to instill fear in people that it's so disingenuous to this point that I feel sorry for those, as opposed to being angry at those who don't get it, don't have the capacity to get it, who are just too angry with what they've been told or how they've been consuming information, that they can't get outside themselves to have that nuanced conversation. I feel sorry for those people, as opposed to being like disgusted by them. I'm disgusted by people who know better, who use those tactics to be able to create this kind of hatred, right?
But I mean, and that's the point, right? If you look at some of the leaders in the MAGA movement, they are Ivy League educated. So it's like, what
they know it's a psyop, right? They do.
Of course they know it's a psyop. It's a profitable, power-grabbing psyop. Mm-hmm. And you know what? And it's been that way since the dawn of time. And so it is the responsibility of people who see that happening to say, you know what? Stop. I see you. We see you. It's what you're doing is harmful. It's manipulative. It's going to injure the very people that you are courting as your base. If you look at a Trump rally, and you think to yourself, how many of Trump's policies when he was president helped any of those people at all? At all. Like name one, right? So it's the disconnect between the needs of the population that they manipulate and the outcomes that population gets once they have power. And if we see that disconnect on the meta level, right, we should be able to talk to that. And it's partly our job as communicators in this conversation nationally to help people see what's happening in their country and to help them be warned or use a critical eye towards things that they're seeing and hearing, and to look at the impact of policies on their lives, not promises, but policies on their lives, right? But it's more the responsibility of the people who are in the same exact arena, like Trudeau and Jugmeat, to call things out that they see with Poilievre. It's their responsibility. They're in that same theater of manipulation. They're in that same artifice, right? So what are they doing about it? Recently, I don't know if you saw Trudeau's rant that was captured and pushed out, I think on Saturday night I saw it, Dean, and my comment was, wow. Like finally something where he looked like he was authentically angry and authentically protective of this country's values. And it was like, more of that, please. I mean, you're the guy who's supposed to be doing it. I personally think they put out that 5-point close the gap timeline. If he doesn't hit it by July, maybe we're going to see a leadership contest. Maybe Carney, who's certainly been greasing the wheels. We'll see what's going to happen. But might not be here for the next election, but it was damn good to see him channeling a little bit of his papa, a little bit of backbone in that moment, because he's the one who needs to be speaking to this shit more than we do.
Yeah.
And so where's that been? Not enough.
No, and that's another great point. Laura Babcock from the O Show, our guest. I love chopping these things up with you. Being from Hamilton, the home of Tim Hortons, this is the only last contentious question I have for you. What is this? What is Tim Hortons doing to pizza? That looks like a prison saltine with pepperoni on it. This is talking about once proud institutions.
Well, as I've said many times to your audience, because it matters to me, I'm more a child of Montreal than Hamilton, although I have lived here for a long time. So I can't speak to the origins of Tim Hortons, but I can speak to that pizza, because my son had a football game and I was picking up my daughter and her boyfriend, and I thought, it's cold on the field. They're going to be hungry after school. Hot pizza looks like a good idea while I'm picking up my hot chocolate.
And
disgusting. They said it had no flavor. It was like a combination between cardboard, and they couldn't figure out what else. Like they even said, Mom, it's not pizza, right? And I'm like, it looked warm. I apologize. And then my daughter followed up with, well, I have had access to good pizza, so maybe I'm being too judgmental. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
no, my child.
No, this is an aberration. You're 100% right. I am glad that your chef's son and your smart daughter both have tried this, and we have a firsthand account from people who've actually had the Tim Hortons pizza. And just quick word of advice for Tim Hortons. Maybe just nail the donuts and coffee again one more time. Maybe go back 50, 60 years. Why don't you crush that again, and then maybe leap into sandwiches, but get rid of all the shit that you can't do well, please.
Or even better, Dean, have the things on your menu in stock. Like, I saw your tweet about that. You nailed it, my friend. Every time we go through the drive-thru, it's like, let me check if we have that. I'm like, then why the hell is it on the menu?
I know. But here's the thing. I've done it like 4 times. I've done this 4 times. I've been to Tim Hortons 4 times in the last 2 years, 4 max. And every time I order my thing, and they're like, come on up to the window. It's going to be a great day at Tim Hortons. And you're like, we'll see. And you get to the window, and they're like, yeah, can you park right there? And we don't have any more grilled chicken. And you're like, breaded's fine. They're like, no problem. You pull in, you park. They come out. We don't have any breaded chicken either. I'm like, well, what do you have? And they go, we got turkey. And I'm like, I'll have a turkey sandwich. They go back in. They're like, we don't have any bread for the sandwich. Would you like it on a croissant, or can I just get you an apple fritter and a chili? And I'm like, that's how you do that, right? That's the bait and switch. They're the worst. They're the worst. And you know what? The fucking crazy part is, I get this upset over a pizza. I get this upset over an institution. I get just as angry over this as the fascist authoritarian talking points in politics in Canada. I'm like, what is happening to my country? What is going on?
Well, sometimes we have to take a break from the serious and down to the microcosm, right? Which is bad selection at a restaurant. And I just have to say, it is May 1st, Loblaw's boycott month. I'm going to do my damnedest, although Shoppers.
Are you doing that? Are you doing the Loblaw's boycott?
Shoppers is my pharmacy, but I'm going to try it, because I do think that a company that was part of a price fixing thing, and that has, just the way that they've managed their comms with drives me nuts on a professional level. I found an arrogance seeping from Loblaws for years. So yeah, I'm going to try to support that. I bought the Loblaw shirt too.
Did you get the Loblaw shirt? Yeah, we put that on blast, and the dude was so happy. He sent us a text, because I'm like, hey, everybody should buy this shirt. And he sent me a note, and he's like, I can't keep up with printing these shirts. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm like, no problem. Have you made some money? He goes, more money than I've ever made. Thank you so much. I'm like, great. Yeah. I was really happy for the dude, but I want to know if this thing's going to work. Like, I want to know if...
you know how I can tell it's already working a little bit? Because for the first time, we're seeing the CEO now. It's not Galen. It's this guy named Bank, of course.
Per Bank. Yeah.
Per Bank actually came out saying, we hear our customers. So even that slight bit of light between their fronting position they've had forever and the reality that they are being seen as, the lightning rod for big grocery, you can tell that they're paying attention now. So I do think it will work. Listen, I used to run a chamber of commerce. You can vote with your wallet too. You can not support entities or businesses that you find to be not of your values. I mean, that's a privilege you got. If you got money, use that privilege.
And here's the thing: if you can stay away from Loblaws. You're also staying away from Shoppers Drug Mart. You're also staying away from No Frills.
Yeah.
What else are you staying away from?
There's actually like 7 or 8, and you can get it online. You just have to look, but those are the big ones for sure.
Okay, so don't go to those grocery stores. Try to accommodate smaller stores. What I do, and just to give people an idea, I get all of my meat from P&F, which is a little butcher shop not far from me. I get all my veggies at Karma Farms, a little place up here in Stouffville. Guys, it's awesome. These people care. They present their food with, they don't just go, what are the margins like here? They're like, no, we want to make sure we've got good food. I get all my milk from a dairy, like a personal dairy. I do all that stuff myself. It's all grass-fed. It's actually cheaper than going to Loblaws or any other grocery store. And everybody should do it. Everybody should try this for the month. And I know it's a lost exercise because the guy's got $20 trillion in the bank and he lives in a glass house on Georgian Bay, literally lives in a glass house on Georgian Bay that nobody has access to. I know it's a drop in the bucket for a guy like that. But to your point, when Per Bank, who made $22 million in the first 6 months because of the margins that they've been able to create off the backs of poor, sick Canadians, I think it's a great exercise to send a warning shot across the bow to these dicks. I really do.
I do too. And you know what? And even going that extra step to local sourcing of your food, if you have the ability to do it. I mean, a lot of people work 2 jobs, right? They just have to grab what they can get when they get off the bus. But I mean, if you have the luxury of doing that, you might find those savings and also support those local people. I think that we have all that locally too. I should really try to do that too, Dean. I think that's a great suggestion. But listen, you know, companies feel these things. They feel the social media outrage. Trust me, I know, because I get the phone calls. And I don't work for Loblaws. I haven't got a call from them or anything, but I'm saying I know that social media matters. And when they see it translate into foot traffic in their stores, into more selective pricing, I mean, they've already made changes based on watching how people are price checking in their stores, right? So they do see consumer trends. They study this stuff religiously. So we can make a difference. You know, the moment, that's why I supported the Loblaws t-shirt guy, because it's like, you know what, when David, goes after Goliath, but instead of using a stone or violence, uses art and language, I'll support that. You know, I'll support people who are trying to make things more just and equitable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do too. By the way, the food professor doesn't want anybody to strike against Loblaws. I just wanted to point that out. Food professor, guy that calls himself the food professor, who gets grants from Loblaws, is like, this isn't going to work. Don't do it. I'd be like, I would do the same thing if they paid my salary. I would probably say the same shit. It's amazing to me. It's amazing watching everybody come out. Yeah, like the National Post came out the other day, big article. It's like, they're a success story. Why are you trying to damage a Canadian success story? I'm like, not really. They're a nepotism enterprise. That's kind of exactly what they are, right?
Well, you know what? You know, whether they came by it by generational wealth or whether they came by it by, you know, being plucky and a startup, they were part of a price fixing scheme, you know? And so, no, right. So, I mean, it's their actions, not their origins, that are of concern to me. You know, when they recommend that shoppers use their points to support charities when they're sitting on $22 million salaries and massive bonuses from margins. I mean, that to me, that's gross. So to me, it's the actions. And we go back to this, whether you call it works or whatever, people's actions are what I think we should all be held accountable to. Not our origins, right? You can't be faulted for being born into wealth and getting a company, but you can be faulted for what you do with that power and that privilege and how you approach people who have less than you. And, you know, we can all do better on that front. So yeah, no, I don't like their ethos. I don't like the way that they have led. I don't like the way that they have made choices. And so that's what drives my opposition to it. And you know what? And one last controversial thing for you, Dean, but topic. I mean, that whole thing when Trudeau announced in the budget they were going to put a tiny, eeny, weeny little extra tax on the super, super wealthy. And I had a weekend of people trying to challenge me on economic theory and call me all these names like I didn't It's like, you know what? It's not punishment. It's called actually contributing to the very country that you enjoy the wealth generation from. Yeah. And one person had the best tweet of the weekend when they said, Laura, they're not mad at the Trudeau government. They're about the tax. They're mad that they have to pay their accountants more to find the loopholes, right? Which I thought was pretty funny.
And it's so true. it doesn't end. I mean, that's, and I kind of respect it because everybody hates paying taxes. I get that. But to your point, these are the same elites that make all the money, that decide all the supply chains, that tell you what you have to pay. They don't give you a break. And when you tell them this is unfair, they're like, oh yeah, well, let's increase the price of butter by 10 more cents just to penalize you, to keep you crying. Here you go. This is per bank. This is the guy who's the CEO of Loblaw's group of company. He put out a piece the other day, says enough is enough, because he had some employees internally sending around emails going, hey, guess what? We're not going to shop here and we fucking work here. Yeah. Like there's a whole section of people, like 26,000 people work for this company. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to shop here either, to prove a point to these people that it doesn't matter that they pay us to do this job. We're in solidarity with Canadians. So I hope they lose millions of dollars this month, Laura. That would be a lot of fun to watch, wouldn't it?
Well, I think so. And I think also, it's a PR adage. It's I think an old Japanese proverb that says the nail that sticks out gets the hammer. They made a decision strategically to front their company with a person, right? To make Galen the guy. And so when you personalize a company, when you give it an identity that people can relate to on a personal, emotional level, sure, and you do things that people are pissed off by and feel exploited by, then you're going to get the hammer, right? And so I am, as I said before, I'm a huge fan of protests to make a more just society, but it can't be violent, right? And it can't promote hate. Deciding not to shop there is an excellent example of a protest in liberal democracy, right?
Oh, this is where I hate all protests equally. You and I are very different that way. I don't like it when people get together and go, hey, let's catch some flies with some shit and let's yell at people and stop traffic. This is a beautiful way to protest, to your point. You just don't have to go there. That's your protest. You don't have to order anything from Loblaws. You don't have to go to Shoppers. You don't have to get your prescriptions there. There are so many independent pharmacists out there who are just dying for your business, who aren't going to bend you or the government over for a checkup you don't need. They'll fill your prescription. They'll call you by name. They'll actually say, hey, it's really nice to see you. You don't get some guy behind the counter going, I hate working for Galen Weston. This sucks so much. We have to meet a quota of people.
See this little jacket that I'm rocking?
So it's a hot jacket, laser cut leather jacket. You look like $1 million.
Well, thanks. But here's the great part about the story is that I was in a part of Hamilton that I normally wouldn't be in. And I was walking by a store that I'd driven by for years. It was like a discount leather warehouse, and a lot of the stores nearby are kind of blacked out and closed down, and that kind of a gap tooth street sort of deal. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to walk in because I do feel like I need a spring leather jacket. So I walked into the store, and they've been there for 55 years, salt of the earth, right? I met the guy who was behind the counter, been the tailor there for 35 years. I got this sweet puppy for $45, right?
Oh, yeah. You got a deal too, Laura.
Well, but here's the thing, right? It's like local business. Completely part of the community, excellent staff that love their job and take their customer. And then he asked about all my family and their leather needs and what was coming in the fall stock. And I mean, like the real deal stuff, right? Not complaining.
Old school. Yeah.
And you know what? Hell, so I posted about it, and the amount of love and traffic I got on that one post about this leather discount warehouse on King Street in Hamilton, all the people who love that business. So the bigger point is, it doesn't have to be just a negative protest against Loblaws. It can be, to your point, a positive protest for local businesses and
for other people who've been funneled out of that industry, right? And there are a lot of them that they've changed our behaviors over time. Like I read a story today and I started dying laughing. The self-checkouts. The grocery store industry is amazing what they've been able to do to us psychologically. Because I grew up as a young man. You probably did as a young lady. We're roughly the same vintage. You go to the grocery store with mom and dad, right? You get a cart, and then you pull the cart up, and you take everything out, and you put it on there. And the nice lady or man would then, they wouldn't scan. They'd type in what it was worth on their little thing, and then they would put it on a belt or put it back. There'd be this little bag boy back then. I was a bag boy at Super Sam. I love that job. It was a great little industry. You got paid $10 an hour to load groceries into a bag, and then you'd go home. It was awesome. You get free chips and shit. And then you'd get those groceries bagged, and they would take them to your car, load them into your car. They'd tell you to have a nice day. And I'm like, what a pleasant experience it is buying groceries. Now they're making us not only be our own bag boys, we get to pay extra for the groceries while we bag our own groceries. And here's the catch. Now they're making you check out your own groceries as well. And I read a fucking great article today. They're like, Walmart is going to discontinue self-checkout because people are stealing too much shit. And I'm like, no way. And then the next line is Loblaws is now looking at removing barriers and self-checkouts in their grocery stores too. Because people have realized, like, listen, I'm going to spend all that money for groceries and you're going to make me do the job of cashier and bag boy on top of it. It's amazing how we've been like, yeah, I'm in. I'll do it.
And the bags and paying for the bags.
The bags, yeah.
Freaking bananas. When I have all my groceries laid on the conveyor belt, and then the person says to me, will you be needing bags? And I say yes, especially now because I collect the extra bags for the homeless line on the weekends, because that's like the number one request is a bag so people can take the food, right? And so I collect them now. But I'm like, yeah, I would like bags. And they say to me, how many? And I'm like, well, you're the professional. Look at what's on the counter. How many bags do you think I need? Like, it's just like, now I got to also figure out the Tetris game of bagging groceries. Like, I got to pay for the bags. I got to know how many bags I'm going to need before I start loading them. I mean, it's insane. And so if I do have to go to Shoppers, which I'll try not to this month. But if I do, I don't want to go to the checkouts. I want to go to the people to keep them employed too, right? It's like, I don't want to use the robot version of you when you're 5 feet away from me. And it drives me nuts. The person who has to stand there around the self-checkouts and fix all the problems that happen every 7 seconds. Just let that person take our groceries through a cash register.
Well, because we're idiots. Like, we haven't been trained on these machines, right? And they're like, go use the machine. Like, I was in Shoppers not long ago because I had to go pick up shampoo or something. I can't remember what it was, something stupid. And I zipped in and I went to go pay. And I always prefer to pay to the gentleman or the lady behind the counter. So one of the things I like to go have that interaction. Here you go. Can you zip this through just in case? Because tech's intimidating to old people like me, right? You're like, I don't feel like checking out. Plus, there's all these buttons like, would you like to donate $2 to this? Would you like to donate $5 to that? I'm like, no. And you feel like an asshole when you do it. That guy only asked me once. So I go to the checkout. This is like 2 months ago. I'm like, I got shampoo. Guy's like, oh, just go and use that machine over there. I'm like, and he's standing there reading something on his phone. He looks up and he's like, no, just go use the self-checkout. I go, fuck no.
Right.
You'll be checking me out today, sir.
And also, do you want to keep your job, person? Why are you trying to disincentivize me to use a human services? Have you not heard of AI? Like, come on.
And everybody in there just looked more miserable than the next person. They're like, we hate it here so much. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take my stuff to this place around the corner called Markham Pharmacy. Markham Pharmacy has everything you need. It's this little mom and pop shop. Guy's been owned it for like 40 years. He's a chemist. Son's a chemist. His nephew works there with him. It's a whole family operation. When you come in, they're like, hi, Dean. And you're like, wow, this is incredible. They just said hi to me. And then you give them your shit and then you pay for it. And they're like, really appreciate your business. Thank you for stopping in today. And you're like, wow, no one looked at me like this.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And you know what? I'm listening to you, Dean, and I'm wondering where you were when I was running a Chamber of Commerce and we were doing buy local campaigns, right? I mean, like you should be the spokesperson for buy local with these anecdotal stories.
Oh, but I'll bring on my meat guy. Like he's coming on next week. He literally, my meat guy is coming on. I'm like, you got to come on. I got to tell people about your meat. And he's like, oh, that's funny. Sorry, don't get too crazy about the meat. I'm like, no, your corned beef is incredible. I got a pork shoulder from this last week for like $32. It was 10 pounds. I'm like, I got to tell people about you because they keep going to these grocery stores. They get things that have best before dates that are a little hinky. Everything looks a little gray and everything costs like 70% more than it did like 5 years ago. Everybody just go outside of your comfort zone to what Laura's saying. Go into these little shops, go and talk to those people and absolutely give Loblaws the stiff middle this month if you can.
One last thing on this, Chef Darrow, now that he works at the French, he's 15, he works at the French restaurant on the weekends.
Your son is incredible, by the way. I just want to point this out. If you go to Laura's feed, you can see this pork that he made in the middle of the night that looks like a Christmas ham. I'm like, what?
Isn't that insane? He actually did like a curing of the pork, and then his technique now that he's been working in a French kitchen has been incredible, right? Like the kitchen at the French is top notch, and so his cooking has become this. But I just want to make this point. If he's walking by and he doesn't watch my shows, but if it's on the TV later and he's seeing this conversation and he hears you describe that pork shoulder, he's going to give me like a death glare of, Mom, why are you not sourcing our meat locally for our fridge? Right? You know, because he spends the weekend walking into a professional fridge and he comes home and goes, what's with this college fridge of ours? And I'm like, what? So, Dean, you might have just helped our family dynamic. Now I can bring in better cuts of meat so I don't have to get shamed for my fridge.
Sister Sanderson Farms, and Adam is great. He'll help you out, and he also owns a disposal company, so he comes and takes my garbage too. He's great. I don't hire the big names; I hire the little people. He's awesome. P&F, little butcher shop up here, just off Elgin Mills in the 404, not far from me. Lucy helps me all the time. She's Russian Ukrainian. She's always there going, "Hello, dear. How are you? Welcome to the shop. What do you need? Got special on sausage this week." And I'm like, "Oh, Lucy, it's so nice to see you." It's those interactions that people miss, right? And to your point,
as a country, we need those.
Yeah,
it makes people
we do.
less
We need those.
angry, less angry.
Totally. And you go into those corporations and those big businesses, and they're like, they just want you in and out as fast as you can because they know they're hosing you, and the people that work there don't want to work there. But go into a business that's family owned, family operated, go into a business that serves really good food where people are proud to work there. Guaranteed it's not a chain. Guaranteed it's not owned by a corporation. It's owned by people who give a shit. Laura Babcock gives a shit. Always great to see you. Download and subscribe to the O Show anywhere you get your fine podcasts. Give her a follow on Twitter as well. I think you've got a YouTube channel as well, if I'm not correct.
I do. You know, we're YouTube right now. The O Show, that is, just search for it. You'll see it. There's where we probably top the algorithm by now. But also we are going to be bringing our O Show back to RSS, back to listening capacity. Got some exciting stuff coming up so that more people can enjoy the content who aren't necessarily YouTube viewers. So that's exciting. It's coming.
Yes, very excited to work with you on that as well. More news, and I'll let you give out that news when you're good and ready. But folks, everybody needs more Laura Babcock and all her friends in their lives. Give her a follow. Go to their YouTube channel. Be looking for news from Laura very soon. Thanks so much for taking time to do this today. Really appreciate it.
It's really fun. I love we talk about everything.
Yeah, we do. We get to it. Appreciate you. Laura Babcock from Hamilton, host of the O Show. This is such a good human being. Need more good human beings that have the ability to have a conversation. Might not agree. And there are a lot of good human beings on every side of the equation. There are a lot of good human beings who fight for the right thing and the wrong thing, right? But that person is self-aware. That's the difference that you'll see between authentic human beings and inauthentic human beings that do this kind of shit. Is that they'll put the best of themselves out there, and vulnerability is great connective tissue, and they don't mind. They don't mind sharing the best of themselves. And that is a smart human being right there. One of the smartest. These are people that you need to follow, not brands. People that have no skin in the game, people that are unbiased. That's my friend Laura Babcock. She's one in a million. So download the O Show anywhere you get your O Show. Go and subscribe anywhere on YouTube, and be looking for news from my friend Laura Babcock coming out very, very shortly. Thanks, everybody, for paying attention to us today. Really appreciate it. As I've always said, you can get more things. You can never get more time. So really appreciate you spending some time with us. As always, you can get everything to do at Crier Media. Go to crier.co for more details, including all of our podcasts. The list continues to grow daily. So please go there today and check it out. Check out all of our content, including what happened with Pierre Poilievre the other day. Guy's just a little ferret. And you can go to our YouTube channel, Dean Blundell Show on YouTube, Crier Media on YouTube, all brought to you by our friends at factcheck.io, disinformation killing software that's ready for you to beta test. Become a verified fact checker by helping them break their beta. FAKTCHEK.io, factcheck.io. It is disinformation killing software created by computer scientists, evolutionary psychologists, and journalists who want the full epistemology of the truth or a lie, so you can decide what you believe and what you read and what you see, whether it's pictures, video, spoken word, doesn't matter. The Shazam BAM feature is incredible. But please go and sign up for their beta today, factcheck.io. Again, factcheck.io is where you have to go. Factcheck.io. Do you believe? Also brought to you by CanTorque, makers of rugged, hard-working torque wrenches out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. CanTorque has bolting solutions for any bolting solution you're looking for a bolting solution for. Torque tools made by the best in the world for heavy industry around the world. We've got nuclear, railroad, forestry, steel industry. Anything that requires a torque wrench or bolting, loosening, fastening solution you can't figure out, these are the best in the world. They do it for every industry around the world. They're number one in their industry, 20 years of experience. All they do is find solutions for bolting. So it doesn't matter if you're in that industry, any heavy industry, and you need a torque wrench, make sure you go to cantorque.com today. Check out all their products. Again, cantorque.com. Product, services, news, podcasts, everything's on the front page, including every one of their products, so you can spec it out. No matter where you are, go to cantorque.com for more information today. And as always, brought to you by Muse on the Mic, musemassage.spa.com, Canada's #1 body house. You can go there today and make an appointment to get a treatment. Choose your Muse, check out the spa, have a look at their schedule. 1290 Finch Avenue West. People come from around the world for redefining provocative massage. You can check out their podcast. Muse on the Mic is the name of their podcast. Emily and Riley do a fantastic job. They've got a Patreon version, uncensored, so go and sub to that. It's only a couple bucks a month, and you can learn a lot. Also get a little randy, because the ladies do get greasy, the uncensored version. Also, you can go to YouTube and check out the censored version, and now download their podcast anywhere you get your fine podcasts, including Crier Media. Go to crier.co for that as well. Google, Apple, Spotify. Muse on the Mic is the name of the podcast. Emily and Riley are lovely. And I run a pretty tidy business too. Gentlemen, ladies, if you're looking for that experience. Dean, just tell them Dean sent you. They'll give you a deal. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Laura Babcock for joining us today. Again, the O Show. Make sure you download and sub that anywhere you can. Coming to an RSS feed near you, which is the audio version of a podcast. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate you. See you soon. Bye.